Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Rexford Nyarko. I'm going to be taking this session. We are going to be looking at cloud computing, as said earlier. Okay, good. So the things we are going to be looking at under cloud computing. First thing, why cloud computing? What is cloud computing? The types of cloud computing, and we'll look at the various cloud providers. We'll look at the life cycle of a cloud computing solution and cloud computing with AWS and some demo of what AWS EC2 looks like, right? Okay, why cloud computing? Now, we have a scenario where you may want to start a company, but generally you do not have all the resources that you need, especially the infrastructure you need to run the organization. Others do have the infrastructure, but keeping and maintaining the infrastructure requires a lot of work. Sometimes you need some technical expertise amongst other things. Like in Ghana, for example, you need constant power supply, you need consistent internet services, amongst others. And this can be daunting to maintain, right? Now, it gets easier for you if you decide to set up everything in the cloud, right? That brings us to the point of using cloud services. Now, cloud services essentially means you have the infrastructure, but it's being run by somebody else. You are paying them to be able to use their infrastructure. That is what cloud computing essentially is. So that infrastructure could be storage, it could be compute or processing power, it could be certain applications that you need. So you don't need to have everything with on premises, right? Instead of keeping that infrastructure and maintaining it yourself, you are mitigating risk by allowing the cloud computing service provider to do that. We'll come to the service providers in a bit. So let's take a look at the differences or differentiating the on-premises versus the cloud computing. Why would you go for cloud computing rather than having an on-premise setup? So like we said earlier on, for on-premise setup, you pay higher. There is a lot more to pay, and it is less scalable, right? When we say scalability, we are talking about the fact that if you need to use it on a higher or on a wider range, it's difficult to do that. The reason that is so is because if you need to expand your infrastructure, it translates directly into costs, which is having to buy new machineries like servers or other infrastructures like switches, routing, and various equipment that make it possible for you to be able to host such services in-house or on-premise. However, if you use cloud computing or you decide to implement your solution via cloud computing, you are able to do that at an affordable rate. You use the services that you need and you pay for only that, right? So we have pay for what you use. If you need to scale up, then it means that you have to pay more. If you need to scale down, you pay less. So when you need more resources, you pay more. When you need less, you pay less. It's as simple as that. However, if you are doing everything on-premise, you are paying more irrespective of whether you need it or not. You have it set up, and so it has to keep running. But with cloud services, you pay for only what you need. Now, on-premise, you have to keep a service space for your service, right? So you need a physical space to keep your service, your machines. And that space has to also be secure, because once anybody has physical access to your systems, they can do as much damage as possible to your entire organization, right? So it is necessary to have a physical space that is secure, and it has to be huge for their service, right? However, in cloud computing, you don't have to do any of those things. You are not bothered by that. Okay, that is not your responsibility. It's entirely the responsibility of the cloud service provider, right? So you don't need all the space. You also, when it comes to on-premise, you have to appoint a team for hardware and software maintenance. Like I said, maintaining an on-premise service is difficult. So you need various expertise according to the various technologies that you are working with. So if it is Linux servers you are running, you need a Linux administrator or expert, networking equipment, Cisco certified experts, depending on what you are implementing. For firewall, let's say you are using a Fortinet firewall, you need an expert certified in that. So you end up having various expertise that you need to employ or bring on board to be able to manage and run the services, both hardware and software wide. However, in terms of cloud computing, you don't need all those experts. All you need are the skills. You may be able to do it yourself, or you just need someone with basic skills of understanding the various services that are provided by the cloud service providers to be able to use cloud computing. So you cut down a lot of costs by that. You may just need about 1 or 2 people, whereas when it's on-premise, you need a lot more people. When it comes to on-premise, also there is the issue of security, right? Data security. How secure can your infrastructure be? You'd either need to get an expert to secure your system. That means that you consistently have to be on top of your game. Your infrastructure has to be up to date all the time because you can't afford downtimes, okay? It also means that consistently or periodically you have security tests being run over your systems to be sure that you are not susceptible to various attacks or cybersecurity vulnerabilities. However, in terms of cloud computing, you have a better data security because you have teams and experts that actually do this. That's what they do. You don't have to worry about all of those things. The risk is handled by them, and that's no more your bother. So on-premise services comes with the ability where you lack flexibility. It's difficult to be flexible in certain things, right? Whereas in cloud computing, you have flexibility. Now, why is flexibility essential? So there are certain use cases, for example, if I need to scale horizontally, that means I need more nodes. The moment I need to do that, it's easier for my applications to run more. But to do that on-premise, it means you may have some downtime probably to reconfigure your services to be able to talk to multiple nodes, right? But in cloud computing, that flexibility is high. Most of those things are already automated. So by a few button clicks, you have your nodes added to your cluster without even downtime. Same thing when it comes to if you have to do things like security updates to certain software components. In the long run, it is very necessary that those things happen. However, in cloud computing, you are likely not to face downtimes, but because you have to do everything yourself with on-premise scenarios, then you'd have some downtimes. So like I mentioned earlier, in cloud computing, you have automatic software updates, whereas on-premise, you manually have to take care of that. You have less collaboration with on-premise services. However, in cloud computing, most of those things are possible. In on-premise setup or environment, you may have everything being hosted in-house. If you are not within the building, you may not be able to access the data, depending on how your infrastructure is set up. However, in cloud computing, it means that you can access everything everywhere, right? Anywhere you are, all you need is what? Internet connectivity, and you're able to access your infrastructure. It takes longer to set up an on-premise data center, whereas in cloud computing, most of the things are already done for you and offered as services. So you can just plug in, select the services you need, and then keep rolling. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so we are going to move on to looking at what cloud computing essentially is, right? I made mention earlier that cloud computing essentially provides you with various services, okay? So all of these services are provided over the internet on the pay-as-you-go on a pay-as-you-go basis, okay? And rather than managing files on local storages, cloud computing makes it possible to have them over the internet, okay? And this is one of the reasons why it is easily accessible over the internet. Anything you want to do, anywhere you are, all you need is just the internet and you are good to go. So then let's look at the types of cloud computing, right? We have deployments and service models, right? When we talk about deployments, we have the public cloud, hybrid, and the private cloud. Now, those three are essentially different types of infrastructure setups that you may need to access. A private cloud means that it is dedicated specifically for what? That particular organization. A public cloud means everybody can access it. It's available publicly, right, over the internet. And a hybrid means you are bringing the two together. So there may be some of the services that may be running in a private cloud and some of the services that may be available via the public cloud. The public cloud service, some of them include AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, Microsoft's Azure, we have GCP, that's the Google Cloud Platform. Now we look at the service model. The service model, in this case, you have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So we'll look at all of them in detail soon. So let's take a look at the deployment model. Anytime you need a car, right? Let's consider the example of vehicles. Anytime you need to go somewhere, you usually take a vehicle. That is, if you don't own the vehicle, right? You essentially go for one of them. That would mean either a taxi, your own car, or a taxi or a bus, right? However, if you own your own vehicle, you can use your own car to go. At the end of the day, there is the need for a means of transport, right? Good. Now, the public cloud can be likened to the bus, right? Whilst the private cloud can be likened to your own car, and the taxi could be a hybrid. Now, let me explain further. So what we mean is that with the bus, you have lots of people joining you. You are sharing resources with various organizations and individuals. Whereas the private cloud is dedicated to only you. So like we see, if it's your own car, you are the only one driving it, right? And in the hybrid cloud, you have a mix of both of them. So like we see in the taxi scenarios, maybe you take a drop in. It is only you, however, it is not your car, right? So even though you're experiencing the luxury of you being the only one in the ride, you don't necessarily own the car. So let's look a bit deeper to public cloud. The cloud infrastructure is made available to the general public over the internet and is owned by a cloud provider. And I mentioned earlier on, we have examples such as AWS, AWS being Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, IBM, Blue Cloud, Sun Cloud, and there are others. Okay, I think there is also Alibaba Cloud Services and the likes. Then we have the private cloud, which means that the cloud infrastructure is exclusively operated by a single organization, and it can be managed by an organization or a third party. It may exist on-premise or off-premise. So you could have your own cloud services that may be either set up, let's say, at a place like the NITA data center, right? Or with a company like Ostec in Ghana here, they have data centers, and you could set up your private cloud there. or if your building has the resources, your organization has the resources, it can be set up in-house, right? Then we have the hybrid, where you have a part of the network or the systems set up in your infrastructure, whilst part of it is made or is using the public cloud services. So, for example, federal agencies opt for private clouds when the data or information there is sensitive, but they may also use what public clouds when the data set is for the general public, right? Then we come to the service models. Now, you have to know which cloud service is suitable for you, depending on what you are trying to do, okay? In essence, IaaS, if your business, that is infrastructure as a service, if your business needs things like virtual machine, you opt for infrastructure as a service. So that way, you have a virtual machine where you run almost any operating system you need. And on that virtual machine, you can set up various things you need to set up. It could be a storage service. It could be a web service, like you running your website or your WordPress website on it. That is a VPS. And then there is platform as a service. If your company requires a platform for building software products, you use the word platform as a service. These usually come off with certain services that enables developers to be able to complete solutions for your organization. So there are various components on there that ideally you would have to set up locally for your developers to, let's say, build softwares such as Git services, such as continuous integration and development. All of those things can be offered for free. For much less via the platform as a service, right? And then we have a software as a service where your business may only not, they don't want to, when they don't want to maintain the equipment, they decide to use the software as a service. And one typical example of that is Office 365, right? You have people running their various office productivity tools such as Excel, PowerPoint in the cloud. All the data, everything they work on will be saved in the cloud. And the main software they are using, instead of traditionally having, let's say, Microsoft Office installed on your PC, you have them within the cloud and your users can access them from anywhere in the world. Okay, so some of the differences between the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. If you are running all of these things via the on-premise setup, it would mean you have to take care yourself of applications, data, runtime, middleware, operating system, virtualization, servers, storage, and networking. All of those things will be within your care. You are directly responsible for them. However, when you come to infrastructure as a service, you are not bothered about the virtualization, the servers, the storage, and the networking components. But you are directly responsible for the applications you run on that. You are directly responsible for the data you have on there. You are directly responsible for the runtime, middlewares, and the operating systems you run on that infrastructure that you are obtaining as a service. If you come to platform as a service, networking, storage, servers, virtualization, operating system, the middleware, and the runtime are all being managed by the company or the service provider. You are only responsible for running the application and then the data. Those are the things you are mindful of. Those are the things that you need to take care of, right? Or you are responsible for. And then when you get to software as a service, you are not responsible for any of those things. So data security, building the application, running the application, various middlewares, operating system, virtualization, server, storage, networking, you are not responsible for all of those things. You just go and use the system as it is. Okay, so let's take a look at the cloud service providers. We have AWS, Amazon Web Service, we have Microsoft Azure, we have IBM Cloud, we have VMware, Google Cloud Platform, and then DigitalOcean. All of these are various cloud service providers that are available right now. Most of them, if not all of them, provide services at a pay-as-you-go rate or pay-as-you-use, okay? So until you use, I said, until you use the resource, you are not billed for it. You being deciding on which of the services to use, you deciding on which of the services you use is highly dependent on your skill set or preference, okay? For some people, they may prefer Google Cloud because maybe they have certain things already running, services they are taking from them, like email. So they may decide to go with Google Cloud so they have everything run from there. Some people may prefer AWS because of the vast number of services they have available. Others may prefer Azure because maybe they currently run most of their infrastructure on Microsoft-based products. So it's easier to integrate over there. It's all a matter of preferences. Okay, so briefly, let's take a look at cloud computing with AWS. AWS, as I said earlier, is a cloud service from Amazon. It provides the services over the internet, and it can be used to create and deploy almost any type of application in the cloud, which means you can have network applications, you can have data storage applications, you can have web applications, including websites, you can have APIs for your mobile application, notification systems, emailing systems, whatsoever in there. Your subscription and pricing model is pay for what you use. Now, in order to be able to deploy a cloud solution, we need to understand the cycle, the life cycle, right? The first thing is to understand the requirements of the business and determine what type of applications you need to run on the cloud. That is going to directly influence the specific set of services that you would opt for from a cloud service provider. Okay, so when you choose a compute service, for instance, that will provide the right support where you can resize compute capacity. So if you are doing something compute intensive, like processing big data in real time, it needs a lot of compute resources. So in that case, you may go for an EC2 instance where if you have a higher load, you can easily expand that or scale that to be able to accommodate that load. You may also have to define your storage needs, and depending on the type of storage needs for your organization, you may need different things. If you are doing things like archiving or backing up data into the cloud, maybe you have an on-premise system, but you want to move all your data to the cloud as a disaster recovery measure, you can use something like S3. There are various services according to your needs, and you just have to research about around them. Then we also have other things like when you want to define networks. So we have something called software-defined networks that allows you to be able to define networks via software. Now, most of the hardware implementation is already done by the cloud service provider. However, you can define the kind of networks you need in your cloud environment via software, and they provide you with the features and the services to be able to do that. So you can have things like DNS services, VPS services that allow you to be able to run various applications and various services. And then we have identity providers like IAM, KMS Cognito, that provide you with security features for your applications. It allows you to be able to control authentication mechanisms and limit access to various services and resources that you are hosting in the cloud. And then we have other things like CloudWatch, auto-scaling, CloudFormation that allows you to be able to control the various processes and tools that you run. And you can dynamically do this even via programming them. Okay, they have SDKs that you can integrate to automatically do some of these things to define the various management controls of your cloud service. 35 minutes, right? I've done 27 minutes. Yes. Okay. So briefly, I'd like to show you what the AWS cloud computing interface looks like and some of the services that you can find available on there. You can later read on to be able to decide what you need in terms of cloud computing and the resources for your application or organization. A second, let me share that. This will be my machine. I have to log into AWS. Okay, for the purposes of time, I'll not be able to demonstrate at the moment. However, we are open to questions if you have any. So far we've looked at cloud computing. Why cloud computing? We've looked at the various types of cloud computing, some of the services available via cloud computing. We've looked at advantages of either running on cloud computing or on premises. We've seen the differences. We've also looked at the types of cloud computing services in terms of infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. We've also looked at the differences and the level of responsibility for you, the user or the organization, in each of these ones. Yes, so in summary, that's what we've captured. If you have any questions, you can send them in. I am open for questions at the moment. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. Just either you raise your hand via the platform or you type your question into the chat. Sir Quex, kindly unmute and ask your question. So the session is actually recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. So you can visit there for the entire session, the presentation. Any other questions? Okay, so where can we or how can we access the recordings? They are on YouTube, like I said earlier. We have another question. Is the rendering of IT services over the internet with pay-as-you-go pricing? The Ernest, please resend your question. It seems incomplete. Oh, I see. Ernest, kindly resend your question, okay? I think it will be important so we answer that. I'm seeing some questions asking to go over cloud computing. Kindly revisit the video on YouTube so that you can get what you need. What is the biggest challenge of cloud computing? So in my expert opinion, currently the biggest challenge is that more often than not, organizations or institutions are a bit reluctant to adapt it because they don't know where the data is going to. That is one of the challenges, which is data governance, right? You need to be able to host within an environment that are having laws that are favorable to your organization. So there are some people that are skeptical about, let's say, hosting on Alibaba Cloud because they know that Alibaba is a Chinese company, and per Chinese law, if the government requests for data on any company or whatsoever, that as, let's say, a client of yours, you are mandated by law to provide it, okay? Which means that your data is actually not private. It's actually under the governance of the Chinese, let's say, government. So they would rather host it somewhere closer to them. So if you look at the various cloud computing service providers, they come up with geo areas, okay, geographical areas where they have data centers. So you can decide to host your data center in a geographic area that helps with whatever you are doing, or the policies of that geographic area is in alignment to your organization, right? Yes. Um, The next question, kindly go over infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and kindly go over the video. You'd get the information you need. Okay, so I'm having a question. When an organization subscribes to any of the cloud service providers, is there legalities? I'm asking because of data privacy and data accuracy. Okay, so I've mentioned earlier on that there are various rules to this. Okay, various jurisdictions have various rules. In Ghana, for instance, according to I think the data protection regulations, you are mandated to ideally host applications that store personal identifiable information, okay, within the country, okay, and that is one of the requirements. So there are legal implications if you don't do that, okay. For example, you are running, let's say, a system that runs or collects data about university graduates, okay. One way or the other is a service, certificate validation system or something of the sort. You essentially have all the data of the various universities and their graduates. Now, that data on any other service provider that is outside the country may raise legal implications. The data protection team in Ghana are very keen about this. They try as much as possible to enforce it. So you may need to find out for your use case, okay, whether it is necessary to go using a cloud service provider outside the country. I know we have some in-country service providers such as NITA or the Smart Infraco. I thought MTN also did some. I don't know if they are still functional, but OSTEC also does provisioning, cloud service provisioning within the country. So depending on what you are using the service for, you may be legally mandated to host within the country or other legal implications. Then, okay, so I have a question. Has cloud computing or storage done more good or harm since its introduction? Essentially, I'd like to say it's done more good than harm. So by virtue of cloud computing, you essentially have various collaborative platforms existing. One of them would be the Google Docs that we use, okay? If you are a community that needs to collaborate or a team that needs to collaborate on coming up, let's say, with a policy document or an agenda or a constitution, whatsoever the document is, you can have that done remotely via these collaborative platforms like I mentioned, the Google Docs platform. So you have multiple people working at the same time to be able to complete that document, irrespective of their physical location. So yes, it's done more good. Other than that, the next option would have been that individually you schedule meetings to physically meet each and every one, and that may be very unfavorable depending on the part of the world that you are in. But via cloud services, we're able to do some of these things. Aside that, you may want to start a business and you don't have all the infrastructure, you don't have the money. However, some $50, $30, $100 a year or every 3 months or so can easily help you push your projects live without necessarily having millions of CDs to host the infrastructure. So yes, cloud computing has done more good than harm. I'm taking just about 2 more questions and then I'll be done. What special soft skills are needed to access cloud computing? So depending on what you are trying to do, or what level of user you are, the skill set will vary. So let's say I'm deploying a solution for an organization. We have the end users, those that are going to be using the solution. For example, if you are using Office 365, that means that essentially you have certain understanding of how to run a computer, how to use a computer, basic computing skills, right? Working with spreadsheets, presentations, Word documents, and stuff like that. To be able to use Office 365, you need to understand how to send emails, and those are basic soft skills, right? However, if I am deploying, let's say, an API service for a mobile app, I would need other technical skills other than the basic computing skills, okay? So depending on what you are implementing using a cloud service, you need different sets of skills. I'm going to take the last question. What are the steps or stages to go through if I want to host a cloud service? That is addressed in the presentation, so you might want to go through. It's the same as the first one. Okay, so which cloud provider is best to pursue as a career? That's quite a difficult question. I can't necessarily say A, B, or C. However, it is very necessary that you do some research to see in the demand, okay? There are sites like, I think, Glassdoor and the rest that do things like they show projections, statistics on usage, the number of people employed, pay rates, and stuff like that. Maybe those may inform your decisions, okay? Some skills are in demand more than some skills. You can get that information from Glassdoor or other sites of the sort. So depending on what you need, maybe even your personal interest, you may decide to go with AWS. Majority of people are on AWS, so you may decide to go on AWS. Maybe you may want to position yourself for companies or corporations that do a lot with Microsoft-based services. Then you may want to look into Azure, right? So it's highly dependent on you. You can decide. However, most of the concepts of implementation in one cloud service provider remains similar in the next. So it means that you can learn how to use AWS, go to GCP or Azure and be able to use those services. The only things that change are the interface and the specific names they give to the services that they offer. But let's say you want to do email services, the name on Azure will be different from the name provided on AWS and Google Cloud. The same thing, if you want just cloud storage, the name of the service will be different from AWS, GCP, and then Azure. So it just depends. However, most of the services are consistent across, and the pricings may be different. Those are the main differences. But in terms of knowledge and understanding the cloud computing concepts, most of them are the same across board. So at this point, I would want to say thank you for everybody that joined the session. Thank you for your time. We hope to see you in the next webinar. So I'm going to hand over to Ernestina to take over from here.
Hello, thank you everyone for joining the webinar series. We hope you enjoyed this section. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media handles. Kofi Annan ICT Center on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn as well. And bear in mind, we'll upload all our videos on our YouTube channel. That's Kofi Annan ICC. Thank you so much. See you. Okay, so we'll have another webinar. So watch out for our interesting topic. Thank you.